It's here. It's the final episode of Beyond the Best Season 2.
I'm a bit emotional. Are you?
I'm not so emotional. No, I'm not. I'm not as emotional as you are. But yeah, I've really enjoyed what we've talked about so far. And for those of you that haven't had a chance to listen to any of our, or watch any of our back catalogue, we are truly living in the 20th century, my friend.
Not the 21st.
No, not that's right. The 21st century is what I meant, of course. So, for those of you that haven't had the opportunity to see what Toby and I talk about on a regular basis, welcome to Beyond the Best. This podcast is the 90 podcast that talks about innovation and particularly how to use innovation to be better than the best in the business at whatever it is the best in the business is doing, and how to apply that in particular to insurance. So we have an interesting topic today, Toby, considering that we are going super digital here.
We are.
Not only podcasting, but also recording a video digitally. You're going to talk to us about something that is distinctly not digital.
Yeah, so we're going to talk today about analog experiences and analog sales experiences in particular, and just the ways that people interact with it. And that's where we kind of like to go with it.
Well, when you talked about this initially, I was kind of like, analog sales experiences. That sounds really, I don't know, really 20th century, I suppose, knocking doors and, shouting at people in the market to buy your insurance or whatever that might be. Can you tell us a bit more about what you mean by analog sales experiences?
Yeah, so as I was sitting down for dinner last night, I was chatting about this because I was having a conversation. Okay. You can tell my conversation is going to be quite poor. But what it is it's not so much the kind of door knocking. It's like essentially, it's basically conducting any experience, product interaction through direct low tech methods.
Okay.
So put it in 21st century. What today is low tech, 100 years ago didn't exist. So we're thinking like text messaging, phone calls, maybe some slight in-person kind of interaction, but it could be things like WhatsApp. But what's key to it is they focus on simple engagements, low touch, kind of more conversational rather than fill in a portal, fill in a form, have a look at our website. It's about, I guess, being slightly more personalized, more human, and providing that information when it's asked for. I think websites and many things today they're not necessarily predicting or guessing. They might have worked it out very cleverly, but they are basically trying to give you the information before you've asked for it. And this is about saying, no, let's take it back. We're not going to flood you with information. We're going to go through very simple steps. And when you need certain information, we will give it to you, but we're not going to give it to you too easily.
So I think this is really interesting. And first of all, I'd like to call you a liar for calling this analog sales experience, because I don't think it's truly analog. I guess what we're saying is, in the world that we live in today, where everything is a smart form to fill out, or there's this kind of AI powered portal, we're going back to kind of conversational, traditional techniques to be able to kind of engage customers.
To a degree.
Okay.
I'll split hairs with you, but I'm not going to.
Okay, fine.
I think you're fair to say it's maybe pushing the boundaries on what analog means.
Okay, great. So I guess just to dig a little deeper on this, why do you think this is important in insurance? What's the point of doing this when we've got all these great tools that exist already?
So the company that we will later come on to talk about aren't insurance, but I think there's a number of things here that makes this particularly relevant for insurance. It really helps kind of simplify stuff, and insurance, as we know, is far too complicated. People don't understand policy documents, people don't understand wording, people don't understand coverages and terms, and this distills stuff down so that you have to be able to communicate it via text. If I sent you a 73-page policy document for cyber insurance in a text, you're never going to get through it. So this is actually about saying, how do we simplify stuff? And I think that can be such a powerful tool for insurers to be able to use. I think it also helps kind of provide that additional tailored guidance to people. And I think in certain markets where people don't understand them, they haven't come across these products, they might not be used to certain products. We're seeing a lot of product innovation where they're covering risks people don't understand so well. having that tailored advice and approach and educational format to it can be again a really powerful thing for insurance. I think it helps increase accessibility. People don't need computers. People don't need to travel. If via text, WhatsApp, it's at the touch of a button on a phone, but it's simple. And I think this is something that we're really seeing, particularly with things like microinsurance in certain markets in LATAM, in other markets in Asia and Africa, where we're looking for simple, low-touch engagement methods that are high volume but low cost. This can be a way to do it very effectively. That means people don't need a whole set of skills or tools in order to engage with insurance.
So I think that some of the examples you gave there are really interesting, and I remember talking to Richard Leffley a little while ago, who's a sometimes colleague of ours at 90, but also the founder of MicroInsure. And he talked about the importance of distribution and the simplicity when it comes down to distributing insurance products and services, particularly microinsurance, and how a text message can be much more effective and powerful than a very carefully designed website or web portal. So, yeah, I'm kind of on board, I think, with what you're saying. Shall I give you some stats? Because I did a little bit of reading about this prior to...
I don't think I can stop you.
No, well,
that excited
you can't. So I'm going to try to read what we'd previously talked about. So let's first of all talk about preference for communication. An important stat here, an interesting stat, 48% of consumers prefer direct communication from businesses via text message. And I think that really highlights the kind of importance of how SMS, and I know we're talking about SMS here in particular, but how simple communication strategies can play a really important part of an effective communication strategy. The other thing that's really interesting about text messages is compared to things like emails, or like I say, compared to things like automated messages through a portal or whatever, there's a 98% open rate, which I think is massive.
That's good.
If we were doing a marketing campaign at 90 and we had a 98% open rate, I would be absolutely over the moon. So hugely biased towards people.
That's crazy, that stuff. Like if I think about products, even banking products, where I get messages through portals.
Yeah.
Sorry, banks, I don't read them.
That's right,
but
exactly.
If 98% of people are opening text, then that is crazy.
Exactly. Well, I'm just going to go a little bit beyond text here to move to some other messaging tools, and I want to particularly talk about WhatsApp as another example. And I know, again, we're stretching the meaning of analog here, but again, a very simple text-only kind of messaging way of engaging with customers. So as of 2023, WhatsApp Business, so the business arm of Meta's WhatsApp, had over 1.5 billion users globally. Absolutely massive, the number of people that are using WhatsApp for business. And then I think when we're talking about customer engagement, some stats on this, about 83% of customers use things like WhatsApp Business to make a purchase or to understand more about products, which I think, again, just kind of talks to the effectiveness of platforms like this to be able to help people use some of these tools more effectively. So I think what I'd like to do, Toby, is move on to the example that you've got. So when we talked about this and we said, okay, who's got a great analog sales process? Again, you stretched the meaning a little bit, but I'd like you to tell us about your example today. Who are
Magic?
Okay.
So Magic are a personal assistant service, but not in its human form, which you would probably argue is more analog. But effectively, they operate their entire product and service through text message. So they will book you hotels, book you travel, find anything from catering, personal needs, business needs, whoever you are, they will basically provide that entire service, but entirely through text. It is 100% from there. They're available 24/7, and they'll do it that way. They're not looking to do it in any other way. But what I really like about them is they don't have any AI assistance behind this.
Okay.
It's entirely human. So they have they have people using the phones to reply to the text messages, or they might have even put those texts on computers, who knows. But they're doing it very differently to how a lot of other companies are trying to adopt these kind of distribution methods where, it might be automated text saying your parcel's arriving. It might be a WhatsApp from your insurer saying, do you want to renew? Or it might be a chatbot for kind of service back and forth. But they're actually saying, no, we're not going down that route. This is going to be highly personalized. It's going to be human. But we're going to just make it simple for people to engage with. So that's what I like about Magic.
I really like this. And I think one of the things that really stands out to me is it's almost the antithesis of the way that other companies are thinking about personalization at the moment, which is it's all tech behind the scenes and then it looks very human when it comes across to you. Actually, this to me feels totally the other way around, which is SMS feels like a relatively flat, cold method of communication, but it's real people putting real messages together. Yeah. So, I think this is a really fascinating case study.
And I mean, it's been successful because of this. It's had rapid user adoption. Within its first month, I think it was like featured on the kind of front page or high up in major publications like Business Insider, Mashable, TechCrunch, like big publications basically saying, we believe in this. On things like Hacker News, it was the most upvoted post. They're getting a lot of acclaim for this. And they've now got, I think, 1,000 remote workers. They've got venture capital in funding them. And how old are they? I think they're less than 10 years old. They're growing at such a speed with that because it's that on-demand human touch.
I think, and I know we're going to come on to maybe a few questions and maybe thinking about this in a moment, but I think again, reiterating that point that actually, the human touch here is still present. This idea of an analog interaction is still very present in this, even though we're choosing a channel that doesn't feel like it's a traditional human channel. And I think it's something so important to insurance companies, which is that establishing that human interaction between the insurance company and the client. So,
I think that's maybe you're slowly coming around to why I called it analog is that human at the center. But I guess a question I've thought about, I'm not sure I've found the answer, so I thought if I can't find the answer, maybe Nick will find the answer, is how do you know when to use human or when to use digital as a kind of, I guess, service or solution?
So this is a really commonly asked question, I think. And recently, I think it's been much more common because people are saying, you know what, we can probably use artificial intelligence for stuff now. When do we use it and when don't we use it? And there's no straightforward answer to this. Well, there is a straightforward answer, but there's no magic formula, I don't think. I think the truth is it's understanding the value that people want from a particular transaction. So most insurance companies now, and I remember this being a term 10, 15 years ago when people talked about multi-channel and omni-channel and this sort of thing, virtually every insurance company now will try and transact with consumers through a number of different channels. The key to understand when to use technology and when to use humans to do things, even if that is getting humans to text people, is understanding what value people want out of that particular transaction at which particular point. It's less about saying, these are the things in the journey that we think we should automate, and these are the things that we think we should actually get a human to do, and more about saying, why might people want to interact with a human at a particular point within the journey? What are the things where we believe that a human would be more appropriate than a machine?
You pull out a really interesting point there around the kind of efficiency, because I feel like when I talk about this with clients or with people, it often is it all about efficiency? But you've turned it on its head there, and I like it. It's not about, you haven't even kind of said, is this about efficiency? It's about value.
And I totally, I think that's kind of what I'm trying to get at here is, if we were to look at this through, and apologies to any accountants out there or CFOs, if we were to look at this through the money men's eyes, this would be, what's the best way to optimize our process to make us more efficient, to spend less money on things that we're spending a huge amount of cash on at the moment. And it should be much more around whereabouts in our journey the people perceive the most value from speaking to somebody who really understands them. Because I think if you understand that, you should then start to understand where actually it's not valuable. And like you say, the kind of efficiency, I guess, comes out of it. But when I guess thinking about this, and this might sound like, that's a big thing to wrestle with. How do you understand where you need to start to create that kind of interaction for consumers? I would recommend starting off with something like the value proposition canvas, or the insurance innovation canvas that we use at 90 is a good example for insurance companies, because I think within that you'll start to think about what are the channels that we need to interact with our consumers through, or our customers through. And you'll start to be able to pick out there, okay, well, this element is absolutely essential for us to start interacting with customers because they have specific expectations, or there are very nuanced pieces of information that we need to get across to them. So yeah, I would certainly start there, somewhere around the value proposition canvas, and it's all, like I say, about understanding the value that people want rather than what's the most efficient way to do things.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and I think my next follow-up question to that is around, once you've got that distilled down and thinking about it. I know when we spoke about this earlier, when we were planning it, you kind of very quickly went, it's all about testing. And, you were like, oh, it's about prototype here. And, I know what you mean by that. And, people who've done it a lot before. But if you're going about testing and building prototypes to understand what's resonating, how would you go through that journey?
So I think you're right, because I think you can try and hypothesize around where people might want to interact with the human and where they don't. But the truth is, you've got to try it. You've got to test these things. There are a couple of things I would recommend to people that are thinking about doing this, that are thinking about running tests or running experiments. The first is that you choose the quickest and easiest possible way to do this. Any test that you're running should be, and we talk about MVP quite a lot. The idea of the minimum viable product is absolutely true in testing as well. What's the cheapest and quickest way to be able to prove or disprove an assumption? There's a great book actually that somebody recommended to me many years ago when I was working at an insurance company called Pretotype It. And it's I think it's free still.
It is free.
You can download it for free on the internet. If you just Google Pretotype It, you'll be able to get it. And within that book, it's just got a whole load of ways that you can run very quick and very cheap experiments. And it's got some kind of examples about, I think it was Nintendo when they were coming out with the Wii, and they had this idea of kind of, having the controllers in your hands. That's probably before your time because you're only 14 years old. But the idea was that, you, rather than coming up with very complex prototypes, they got a couple of blocks of wood on piece of string and asked people, does this fit in your hands? When you're playing the game, would this work? And I think we're talking about something very similar here, which is, if you're trying to test what's the right time to interact and the right method to interact with people, when do I need to be a human and how human do I need to be? You've got to think of what's the quickest and easiest way to do that. You don't need to build an enormous platform to test an assumption.
And I think that's where the name, isn't it?
Yeah.
Pretotype is about prototypes have gone too far, they're too complicated.
Yeah.
We're all going wrong. And I think the nice point you pull out there is the bit about cost is so key. My experience is a lot of people when they talk about MVPs and pilots and prototypes is they're trying to validate the business model, and testing and MVPs and pilots should never be about the business model. It should be about the customer value.
Yeah.
Once you've proven that, you can find a business model that will work behind it later. But I think I like your point around saying don't focus on that, focus on value and testing.
So, I don't know whether we've got any more questions, Toby, or if we're happy to move on to wrapping things up.
I think we can move through to wrapping things up.
I think we can. And I guess, so I know we started talking about this being about the analog process, but I guess one of the kind of key things for me as I'm kind of thinking about takeaways here is digital is not always the best answer to everything. So there is a place for digital interactions with customers and digital interactions of all different types. But I guess the kind of takeaway here for me, the first one is think very carefully about whether or not digital is the right thing to do. And when I'm saying digital, I mean kind of, large platforms or kind of portals or whatever it is. Actually, it's not necessarily the best answer to everything. I don't know whether you've got any specific takeaways from today.
Yeah, so I think the thing that kind of distilled out earlier, and I think you maybe pulled it out from one of the things I was saying, was the simplicity element. Less is often more, and simplicity is often the key to a great experience. Trying to do less things but doing them very well is often better. And Magic have worked that out, is that the simplicity of the messaging, doing it via text, means that you provide that great experience. As you said, it in a way feels like quite a bland, I guess, personless experience, but they've made it their kind of USP is, no, we're going to put the person into this. And I think keeping kind of on the simplicity can be really key to the success here.
I love that, and I really like this idea about taking something that feels super simple and amplifying that as a USP. I think is fantastic, because as we move towards an increasingly digital age, and we try to use tools like artificial intelligence to provide the best possible experience, what's the simplest way that you can provide that experience? And sometimes it's not going to be this overblown, hugely expensive and complicated tech platform. Sometimes it's people in a room sending text messages. And if that's the right way to do business, and if that's the right way to interact with your customers, it's absolutely something you should consider.
And the simplicity element, I think, plays out into your final point around the prototype and testing. Is the simpler the experiment and the simpler you build the prototype to test it with, the better it is, because you're going to be very specific about what you're trying to learn and measure. And trying to test 4, 5, 6 different things early on, you'll confuse yourself and trip yourself up. And you're better to know one thing rather than not know 6 things.
You're absolutely right. And I think, again, coming back to the Nintendo example there, had they have tried to test 7 or 8 functions in one prototype, it would have had to be very, very complicated. As it was, the assumption they were trying to test is, are people comfortable holding things like this in their hand whilst they're playing video games? It literally took a block of wood.
Yeah.
They didn't have to develop anything complicated to come up with the answer to that, but that was purely because they were very clear on the assumption that they were trying to test, or the problem they were trying to overcome, developing something really simple and really quite elegant, actually, to be able to prove that their solution would work.
There we have it. Finishing with a point on elegance.
So there we go. Yes. Thank you, Toby. I've enjoyed this season. We will be back for another one, I assume.
Oh, well, I think our email inbox will
think
demand
so.
it.
If we have the similar amount of overwhelming popular demand that we had from the last season, we'll certainly be back for season 3. But until then, thanks again, Toby, and this has been Beyond the Best.
Yeah, thank you very much.